Las Vegas. Sin City. A playground in the desert that occupies a place in our collective imaginations for glamour and excess. Sphere is the latest representation of that. It's a mecca for entertainment, at the bleeding edge. But there's a price to pay. It costs about the same amount of electricity that you would need to power 21,000 homes to keep the lights on. And they're building a $1.4 billion solar park on the border of California just to do that. In many ways, it reflects the technology industry as a whole. We're striving for exciting breakthroughs in healthcare, in education, even in trying to tackle the climate crisis. But the price is high. It would need us to reforest a country about the size of Germany with 40 billion trees just to offset the carbon that we're burning through when we sit in our living rooms, streaming, searching and prompting. Our own research suggests an abdication of responsibility. Less than half of those sitting around boardroom tables recognize the crucial role that technology can play in tackling the climate crisis. Most companies don't even have a net zero target. You're left with the overwhelming feeling that the technology industry is hoping that someone else is going to pick up the bar tab.
This week, over 130,000 people will be in Vegas for the Consumer Electronics Show. And the CTA, the company who runs CES, have placed sustainability and the energy transition at the heart of their annual conference. But where is the line where tech stops being part of the solution and this all spirals out of control? To help us understand the issues, we first need to leave Las Vegas. Our investigation has to start with data because data is everywhere. Without it, many of the services we rely on day to day grind to a halt, and the innovations at CES just wouldn't be possible. So to better understand the impact of data, I've come to Windsor to talk to NetApp, who describe themselves as the intelligent data infrastructure company.
The global data sphere, so kind of every piece of data created by everything, the projections are it'll be about 175 zettabytes when we get to 2025.
I don't know what a zettabyte is.
So the next one's going to be even worse then, because that puts us on a path to hit the yottabyte problem as we get out towards 2030. A yottabyte is 1 trillion terabytes. That's the equivalent of every single human being on the planet carrying about 300 iPhones.
Everything that we use, getting here today, Google Maps, etc., is reliant on data. There is this flood of data being created, and it is only increasing. That has to place huge stress on critical infrastructure, and that also has to have stress on the environment.
21% of Ireland's electricity is currently going to data centers. At the moment, about 20% of that power is related to storage. Now, that's forecast that it could hit 38% or more by that 2030 timeframe that we mentioned earlier on. But here's the killer statistic. 68% of the data that we store is fundamentally a landfill of garbage that we do absolutely nothing with after it's been created. It is what we call single-use data. The amount of power or the amount of emissions that are created by the single-use data is typically more than the emissions that are created by the entire airline industry.
What does that really look like in terms of the demand on infrastructure and the demand on energy?
Because it's so invisible, it's hard for people to comprehend just what the scale of the impact is. You can see a plane, you can see a car, you can see those things. You can automatically start to get a feel for the emissions that are coming from it. Whereas if you look at Ohio, it's 50 data center providers looking to build 90 new data centers. They estimated that the amount of power at peak load, because these are data centers for AI and they have a much higher level of power requirements, the estimated level of power was that would be the equivalent of 21 million households. That is just 90 data centers in Ohio. There are currently 11,500 data centers in the US. And to meet the AI ambitions, is it double? Is it? I don't know. But data centers that we're building for AI are very different than the data centers we built for cloud. Cloud data centers, we're talking about 10, 15, 20 kilowatts per rack. AI data centers, 150 kilowatts plus per rack.
Morning.
Hi.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your home.
Welcome to Twickenham. The classic issue which has now come to light is the way in which the big expansion of artificial intelligence and learning models is generating an enormous demand for electricity. I don't think we fully understand where the data center revolution is leading. It may, in any event, be diminished by the DeepSeek model technology. We don't know where the electricity comes from that is going into these. I mean, if the electricity is produced on wind farms or next generation nuclear plants, then the impact on global warming is greatly reduced and we need to worry less about it. And technology evolves very rapidly. We mustn't get, I think, carried away by dogmatic judgments one way or the other.
So what's driving the surge in demand? It's certainly not an issue confined to one sector, but few highlight why data is so sought after, like the advertising industry, films, TV series, music. En masse, it's all content. Why do Amazon make movies? Because few mediums tell you as much about a person as what they choose to watch.
People have right to privacy, but ultimately it's a value exchange, the way I see it. Like, people don't want to give information unless they're getting something valuable in return.
Are there indications, rather, that sustainability is beginning to be part of that value exchange as far as the consumer is concerned?
You can tell people don't drive, ride a bike, but if it's raining out, they're going to drive, right? People want to better their lives, and I think that's human nature. I think a problem that I see in the environmental movement is it focuses on the downside of it. Oh, you're going to wash your clothes. You're going to have to live in a small apartment. You can't have AC. No one wants that, right? So I think that believing in the people want to improve their lives. I think the opposite of that is instead of looking at tech as the problem, we can look at it as the solution. We can build better technology that does things more sustainably, creates a healthier environment. And I think you do more with less. And I think you look at the last few decades, people don't realize it, but that's what's been happening. We're producing a lot more, much higher standards of living than ever before, and it's actually costing us less.
Organizations love data, but they need to manage the growing mountain they're sitting on. How can technology help us find a balance?
We created this application called Vanishing Emails. This application looked at helping organizations reduce their carbon footprint by taking a look at carbon emissions created by sending and storing email communications. Now, it seems like it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but when you really add up all the billions and billions of emails, to your point before about all the information, it requires a lot of carbon to generate the power to store those over time. So this application used machine learning to look through subject line, the content email messages themselves, and any other signals from the emails to determine, is this a commercial email? And if so, let's just get rid of it. I think overall, it was more than 600 billion emails have been deleted in just year one. And I think it's over 6,500 tons of CO2 have not been emitted into the atmosphere just because of this alone. So I think little things like that, technology, innovation, looking to identify how are ways we can be more sustainable. And I don't think that's resulting in a worse experience, right? Just deleting some promotional emails. So I think if you look to innovation, you can identify ways to reduce your carbon footprint, and you can do it in a way that doesn't impact your experience, and in effect does the same or more with less.
So Scope 3 is a sustainability platform that focuses on digital technologies, advertising, AI, really all the data centers around the world that are using up so much energy and electricity. We're trying to find ways to measure and reduce the impact they have on the environment and on the economy.
So let's put some of the numbers and some of the figures and percentages in here, because it'll give people some context. And you might have to correct me. I was looking at your website. I think it was 7.2 million tons of CO2 waste from wasteful ads, I think.
That's what we've identified as total waste.
Right.
That's 7 million tons and probably give or take $8 to $10 billion of waste. We probably should put $8 billion of waste on our website and then in small little text say, oh, and by the way, it's a bunch of carbon. But of course, we do the opposite. But that's what gets people excited, is when you think about all the money that's being wasted on ads that nobody sees or that are totally ineffective. Well, if we can put that money back in the pocket of the marketer, that's amazing. And let me give you a sense of magnitude. Based on some numbers from McKinsey, data centers will use about 580 terawatt hours of power by 2028. That's give or take 12% of the US's entire electricity.
Wow, okay.
That's more than, I think it's Texas, New Jersey, and California combined. It's some crazy amount. So if you think about that, that's a material amount of energy that we could be using for productive things like cooling your home or powering electric cars, or to turn off a bunch of coal plants. Like, there's reasons that we should not be using our precious energy resources serving ads to nobody.
When I've talked to people, they're optimistic. And I understand that. We work within the technology industry. We're here at CES. We're celebrating innovation. And I think the narrative is that these are big challenges that we're facing, but AI in particular and technology can find the solutions to the sustainability questions that we're faced with. Do you think that's overly simplistic? Is it a little bit that, yes, of course, we're not going to close the lid on innovation. We're not going to take a step backwards, but there needs to be a little bit more critical thinking for the industry.
That's like saying, when Elon Musk announces that his cars are going to be self-driving next week, and 10 years later, by the way, I paid for it, 10 years later, my car still drives like a skittish teenager, right? Maybe someday my car will drive itself the way that I was promised. The problem is, that's 10 years. And so, yeah, maybe someday AI will give us the capabilities to fundamentally change the world. But think about the infrastructure problems. You're in London, I'm in New York. What if AI says you should build more subways? Well, AI, as far as I know, is not going to get out there and get all the regulatory permits and go lobby Congress and go find the money and get people out of their, Ford pickup truck, This is something that's going to take real world infrastructure. And so, yeah, AI can help us solve some of these problems, but it's going to be a massive, massive long-term investment that I just don't think that's it's not a real solution. I would consider that to be hope. I'm hopeful, but I'm not waiting. I want to see us do things today that can make the world better.
Industry is highly competitive, and AI is making it easier to identify and tempt you. But of course, we want more personalized experiences. Technology is driving the demand for data to dizzying new heights. Let's not lose sight of the fact that data is solving very real problems. Kubota rightly point to labour shortages across agriculture and construction. Automation can help tackle these issues.
We're getting a huge demand from farmers because the labor shortage is real. And it's a shortage in areas such as spraying and then other skilled areas that need help. And so by applying artificial intelligence and autonomy, we're really trying to help the sustainability of agriculture and help feed all the millions of people that are out there.
How do you make sure that that's something that really is part of the DNA and flows through the whole business?
That's what I love about Kubota is it's really about purpose. There's not a meeting that we go in where we don't talk about the sustainability. The sustainability of our customer's business, we're really tied to the customer, but also sustainability of the environment as well. And so that is a factor in all of our decisions. We're marrying technology with purpose and really looking at the improvement of the quality of life for individuals and to help contribute to a better society. And so Kubota has a very long-term vision and is patient in trying to make the right solution, make it economically viable, both for us as a company, but also for our customers, and yet help the environment as well at the same time.
As impressive as technology is, it's not particularly efficient. Back in 2017, an AI program called DeepStack became the first machine to beat a professional poker player. If we assume it took 150 kilowatt hours to train DeepStack, the stats were never published, but it's not unreasonable given the size of the program. That's roughly 500 burgers to teach it to play poker. Now think about the pace of change we're seeing in technology. 2017 is ancient history. The models we're dealing with today are much larger and vastly more complex.
Tell me a little bit about Literal Labs and what your role is.
Literal Labs, we're a UK startup focused on very low energy, efficient AI. It's a radically different approach to AI that uses a logic-based approach, not a neural network-based approach.
An AI search takes a lot more energy and is a lot less efficient than a traditional search.
Yeah.
So when you say low energy, can you put this into context so people can understand what differences we're talking about with the technology that you're dealing with?
One of the big challenges with AI and how AI's evolved is the computational complexity of the underlying neural network-based technology. And our approach in recent benchmarks have shown that we can deliver the same results 54 times faster, 52 times less energy. So really significant improvements in both speed and energy efficiency, because what we're doing is we're reducing the compute complexity required to do AI.
I'm a technology evangelist. I firmly believe that technology can play a crucial role in helping to enrich our lives. For instance, just look at the role that AI played in helping us to find a vaccine during the COVID-19 pandemic. But that doesn't mean that we should ignore some of the questions that we face and that technology poses. And we should also ask whether technology is best placed to be the thing that helps us find those answers.
The technology community is full of problem solvers, and it's about looking at and making sure that we're focusing on the right problems to solve. And I do think originally, particularly when you look at AI, the focus was on performance. How do we get more performance that allows us to build bigger models that are more complex models, et cetera, et cetera. And you almost, the community goes down that trajectory. I think now what is starting to happen is we've gone down that route, worked out that actually, yeah, but what about energy? And now the focus is shifting towards, yeah, but how do we now reduce the energy burden of the AI systems, improve the economics of the AI systems? As a bunch of engineers, we're problem solvers. Give us the problems to solve, and we'll put our brains together and solve them.
It's not unreasonable to press organizations present on how seriously they're taking the questions that we're raising in this film. After all, we simply don't have the power to realize the innovations that we see around us at a conference like CES. And the carbon footprint we generate is growing all the time. But when Nash Squared quizzed digital leaders about how their board recognizes the role that technology plays in reducing the carbon footprint, less than half recognized the role that tech plays.
When I think about the research that Nash Squared has done in the industry, there seems to be a lack of recognition of the role that technology plays in tackling climate crisis and sustainability.
You have research, but I have discussions and views. And anytime I raise environmental issues with our volunteers and our leaders, that's the number one issue they want to talk about and do things about. First of all, they're all human beings. Mm-hmm. Many have kids and grandkids, and they care about the future, and they care about what we're doing. There is a passion on these issues. It's pretty intense. We have done things. We've created so many voluntary standards, for example, for energy usage with cable, with TV sets, with others. We've partnered with environmental groups. We've done things. We've talked about the Paris Accords not going far enough. There's the opposite, in my view, especially actually if you look at the traditional United States political system and where the technology industry has been. I mean, the biggest news of the year is that some tech companies' executives are actually supportive Republicans. They're very, the big companies seem to be, for the most part, pretty environmentally sensitive. So you have maybe data, I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. The Democrats and the technology community are like this. And there's a breakthrough, with Elon Musk and a few others this year, where we're willing to vote for more conservative people. So I have no idea what you're talking about.
Whilst Gary didn't recognize our data, I still wanted to press industry leaders on how they're responding to sustainability concerns.
From a technology perspective, we get so excited about the application and the opportunity, and sometimes we forget about what the impact of that is. And so I think we have to look across the entire value chain and the whole life cycle of our products. And only then can we look at where the biggest impact can be made. So in the space industry, we've been so focused on just getting things up there, monitoring, Earth from orbit to launching to space. Like, we're so fixated on getting technology into space, but at what cost? And so finding that balance of, okay, so it's doing really good stuff for planet Earth up in space, but is that balance right? And so from a Slingshot perspective, we have these our own manufactured sensors that actually take up a really small footprint where they are around the world. We can go, a couple technicians put them up. Our impact on actually getting them where they need to be is quite low. But so our biggest thing is the data. And I think with any AI company now, it is how we are storing that data and what it takes to do that. And space is actually the answer to this problem. We, as an industry, are looking at how we have data centers in space where they're not needing to be cooled, where the water isn't needed, where the space itself, as in footprint on the ground, is not needed as well. So we're really involved in that, looking at where we can identify ways that space can actually be a positive impact for AI and help solve some of those sustainability challenges that might come up from AI.
People are seeing that whole climate warming is a real issue, and essentially we need to solve this problem, right? The world is becoming warmer, and so unless we do something as a society, things will not change. So what companies are doing is their CEOs are putting really bold goals out there. We will be carbon neutral by 2035. Well, we are in 2025. I'm saying something out there in 10 years. Well, I will no longer be CEO by that time. So I'm making the bold claim without really knowing how to get there. Country prime ministers, presidents, right? They are saying we'll be carbon neutral by 2070. So these political leaders and CEOs of companies are making these bold claims without actually knowing how they'll get there.
How do you make sure that sustainability is part of your strategy as an organization, particularly given that you are someone as a C-suite leader who can set the tone?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about sustainability, people talk about this scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 is how the design of your operations is impacting society. How much carbon emissions do you generate? We are a software company. We are not in the manufacturing of products, right? So therefore, we actually don't generate as much carbon. However, we do impact the scope 1 emissions of our customers. So this year in particular, what we have done is we have done some collaborative work with McKinsey on what we call the product footprint, right? And we worked with customers like Infineon, with Danfoss, with Mars, and showed quantitatively how much we can reduce the scope 1 emissions of the products that they are designing using ANSYS simulation.
We've spoken to Scope 3 as part of this film. I know it's a company you're familiar with. How important can reporting be and greater transparency be in getting boards to understand this issue?
There's a lot of education that has to come in the sustainability factor. That's some of it is what are technologies that can simplify that equation, again, using data. So there is an AI, there's a datafication story that helps inform boards to really showcase what is the scope of our impact, how does this maybe have a ROI standpoint, and we should maybe rephrase ROI from return on investment to return on impact, because there's a lot of intangible assets. Arguably, innovation and technology, most cost economists would say that's not really a tangible asset. It's not like real estate. It's something that's intangible that gives them value in the first place. How do you couple sustainability into that intangible assets class? There's no standard globally. It's nation to nation. So how do you convince boardrooms to sometimes step up and make that decision so they can standardize an approach in the absence of maybe a regulatory scheme?
CES represents the cutting edge of our industry. If we're likely to find innovative answers to the challenges we face, it might well be here. And one breakthrough technology is generating more excitement than most. Could quantum be a bit of a silver bullet? And I ask that, I'll set some context around it by saying, the promise of quantum is vast compute power with minimal energy requirements. Is it something that you think we could be tangibly excited about in trying to address some of these challenges?
We have to be, especially if the 2020s are really kind of the intelligence decade where AI investment is coming through, building artificial intelligence architecture and infrastructure. A lot of AI ecosystems are how we're training and testing for the quantum future, which the 2030s will be that quantum decade. We're getting closer to it, where you're already seeing AWS Bracket, some of the Azure quantum capabilities to really test and prepare for that quantum future. Because what quantum does offer is rapid, vast computing power. It has the minimal energy footprint. It also has a lot of precision too, which that's maybe where AI is intelligent, basing off real life and synthetic data to get the output you want. But quantum gets it down to even more precise level, which means you're not generating scenarios you don't need anymore. And furthermore, quantum's vast computing power unlocks a few different energy pathways, one of them being fusion, which felt like if you had asked me on my first show in 2020 when I was here,
Fusion wasn't even being talked about because we didn't really know if we could achieve it. Flash forward just a couple years later, the Department of Energy in the United States creates fusion ignition twice, which means it's no longer theoretical concept. It means it's achievable. You see a 200% increase in that workforce. Quantum allows for that computing power that helps generate the scenarios around fusion reactors to happen at a much faster speed. So you're getting that sustainable energy from fusion sustainably from less computing power that's also more efficient than where we're at with AI. AI is revolutionary because it's paving the way for that quantum future.
We've heard plenty to give you hope that technology can find solutions, but we must keep pressure on our biggest actors to make meaningful change. That needs to come from both within our industry, but we also need to listen to those with experience on a global platform.
What can governments do when working with industry to make sure that sustainability is front and centre moving forward?
Government leadership on these issues is important, and it doesn't have to be money. It could just be visibility. Emmanuel Macron of France came to CES many times and showed the world how entrepreneurial and innovative the French are. We score every major country in the world that has data as to how innovation friendly they are. And we look at them based on a whole bunch of criteria. It's very transparent and honestly very American-centric. I mean, we look at, do you have clean air, clean water? Do you welcome a diverse point of views and people, how difficult it is to start a business? What's the tax structure? All these different things. And we just announced the results this week. And I recognize that a more stable country, for example, politically, it's much easier for the leaders to speak on these issues of innovation, energy efficiency, environment, and different things and be leaders. When then President Trump pulled out of the Paris Accords, my feeling it was the right thing to do because the Paris Accords didn't do anything. They didn't go far enough.
How do you think we can get to a place where government and industry collaborate in a way that helps achieve the goals that we're talking about in this film and enables a greater awareness of some of the sustainability challenges that face technology?
Well, I think the mechanism to deal with the problem you identified is through what's rather grandly called industrial strategy. I mean, when I was Secretary of State, I introduced one. It was fairly light touch. We weren't saying, we're going to back this industry as against that industry. It was more general in terms of emphasizing training, availability of finance, innovation. But it was accepting the fact that the economy is roughly divided into sectors. And at a sectoral level, it's useful to have people around the table, government, business, academia, pooling their knowledge and understanding. And that is the best way of taking this forward. And I think the industrial strategy we had, it was 10 years ago, worked very, very well. The Conservative successor government continued it for a while. But then, round about 2020, they dropped the whole thing, and we've had a hiatus for 5 years with a lot of uncertainty, short-term thinking. And I think the new government is committed to restoring that model. So what I call industrial policy, industrial strategy, taking a comprehensive view, which is long-term, crucially, and which does involve business and industry interacting.
In 2006, the mathematician Clive Humby coined the phrase, data is the new oil. And 20 years on, frankly, it feels as fresh and as relevant as it ever did. We're hooked on cheap storage that we need to house the mountain of data that we're generating. And as we've heard, we don't have the energy that we need. Competition for AI could harm the very cooperation that we need as an industry. It's a perfect storm that frankly makes it hard to imagine that we're going to meet those net zero targets that we need to tackle the climate crisis.
Government and industry, they've got the message. I find it quite inspirational working with business guys who are not ideologues. They're not right-wing, left-wing and interested in that kind of argument. They're just practical guys, and they're interested in it from a practical and an engineering and a business point of view rather than an ideological point of view. So I think they have got the message. It's just that there are a whole lot of obstacles in the way. There's the problem of fundraising, there's the functioning of the grid and all the planning issues around that. There's a whole lot of problems converting the rhetoric of green transition into reality.
Consumers have a choice. And companies and consumers are increasingly wanting to work with other companies that have net zero goals or that have aggressive sustainability targets. So the optimistic part of me says that we're on a path towards trying to become more sustainable. And what we need to do is accelerate our journey along that path to meet this massive growth we're seeing in AI ambitions.
You know, people made fun of Prince Charles because he's like, I'm not going to heat my swimming pool. And everyone's like, that's not going to save the planet. Well, I tell you what, it got people talking about what might save the planet. And I'm all for that. So I think this is a everyone, all the time, and all the little ways we can without compromising living a great life. If you have to compromise or sacrifice, at some point you're going to get tired of it.